Welcome back to Echo Ridge. Today, we need more gas. I know, not exactly what you were expecting to hear. We've started venturing out further and further from the 10,000 kilometer ring, for the simple reason that we just need more data modules. And since we've collected all the data modules from this planetoid, it's time to move out to the 30,000 kilometer ring, so that we can continue to collect data modules, but also, look at this, 31% steel. I mean, that's a bargain. The issue comes down to petroleum. You can see right now we're back up to over 2 tons worth of petroleum, but we don't have any in reserve for our petroleum rocket engine. And the issue just comes down to power. Each of these liquid fuel tanks takes 900 kilos worth of petroleum, which is about 2 tons. And for reference, the 2.5 tons sitting in this tank, we've been collecting for about 10 cycles now. One of the methods we're using to actually get a surplus in petroleum is to watch our power draw. For instance, the Oxalite refinery takes 1200 watts. So when we turn the Oxalite refinery on to create more oxalite, we drink a lot more petroleum. In fact, I've noticed that when we run the Oxalite refinery, we actually lose more petroleum than we're creating. And it just comes down to the fact that the oil well can't produce enough oil for us to convert into petroleum. So I think we're going to try to cram another oil refinery setup into this space here. I know we have all this beautiful liquid oxygen and the liquid hydrogen all ready to go. In fact, you can see we're actually full on liquid oxygen and the high pressure gas vent's been turned off. But unfortunately, both the liquid oxidizer tank and the hydrogen engine are still locked behind cryofuel combustion. So until we complete this research, we're not using liquid oxygen or liquid hydrogen. And we still need 700 data banks for that research. Not to mention, it would be kinda good to finish up all the research using the petroleum engines, and that way we could play the fun game of Pimp My Ride with the hydrogen rocket. At that point, we'll be able to load it up with a bunch of cargo bays, both solid and liquid and gas, and then start collecting from all sorts of planetoid. Now, truth be told, we don't necessarily need those materials, considering the game was friendly enough to give us niobium, isoresin, and fullerene all within the 10,000 kilometer ring, but still, it'd be fun to do anyways. We also have a few other updates around the colony, but first, I wanted to give a special shout out to, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher this one, Dirhauj or Dirhauji, for the creation of the Mini Base 2 plus Tunnels mod. So if you've been waiting to be able to dive into a mini base playthrough, now's your opportunity. I can see by their public profile on Steam that their name is Paul, so I'm just gonna go with that. So nice job, Paul. The community appreciates your efforts. In the background, while I've been waiting to refill on petroleum, I've been working a little bit on the decor. We started adding a bunch of the paintings everywhere, which, by the way, I absolutely love. That in one of the last updates, they started adding the name of the painting inside the tooltip. This is the astronomer at home. This is the smooch. We've already introduced still life with barbecue and frost bun, but have you seen, behold, a fork? Just make sure that fork doesn't end in a garbage disposal, will you? We also have a farewell at sunrise and girl with a blue scarf. We've also finalized our molten slickster stable. As you can see, we are chock full on moltens, and there are no longer any regular slicksters coming through. But just in case they had any bright ideas of laying a larva egg, we're going to quickly turn that into an omelet. Now, if you remember, the reason why we did this setup is twofold. One, to continue to eat all the carbon dioxide. Right now, we're still sitting at around 80 kilos worth of pressure. The second reason was for the petroleum. The great thing about this setup is all of the molten eggs are going to come over here and get dropped off. Well, they'll eventually hatch. Because the molten slicksters aren't going to starve, they're going to live their full 100 cycles, continuously consuming more and more carbon dioxide. Now, because they are glum, because they are not being properly groomed, they're only going to be consuming 20% of their normal dose of carbon dioxide, which the normal dose per cycle is 20 kilos, which means these moltens are only going to be consuming 4 kilos worth of carbon dioxide per cycle. But because every last molten slickster egg is coming over here, even though it's only 20% consumption the numbers are going to start to add up, and the slicksters in this room are eventually going to start consuming more carbon dioxide and producing more petroleum than the slicksters that were actually in the proper stable being groomed. Which then begs the question, well, if we're going to be producing that much petroleum, why go through the painstaking process of putting in another oil well here? And that just comes down to the amount of petroleum they're able to produce. A happy and well-groomed molten slickster only produces 10 kilos of petroleum per cycle, which means all the slicksters in this room are only going to be producing 2 kilos of petroleum per cycle. So if we estimate 8 groomed molten slicksters all producing 10 kilos per cycle, that'd give us 80 kilos. But then even if there are 50 molten slicksters in the incubation room, that's still only another 100 kilos of petroleum per cycle. Well, with each liquid fuel tank requiring 900 kilos, that would still take the molten slicksters 5 cycles to fill one liquid fuel tank, or 10 cycles to fill both. And that's not even counting the petroleum that these two chunkus hogs consume. Also, a small update on the scaldings. They've nearly stopped, and that's thanks to community member EZAZABC, who, after doing a little bit of research, has found out that the scalding bug has been occurring since January of 2021. The theory goes that because the duplicates are in a very hot area and they take their suits off relatively quickly, that's what's causing the scaldings. So I tried moving the suits back as far as possible, and the scaldings have reduced to very few and far between. I think it has something to do with the interaction of going through the very hot areas and then hitting the vacuum, because what I have seen is it's in here that the dupes originally get their little scalding bubble. Furthermore, since we haven't been able to launch this rocket in quite some time, the whole rocket shaft is vacuumed out. And since they go from here, which is still pretty hot, into a longer vacuum, I haven't seen any of the scaldings. Regardless, I'm still happy to move the suits back, and I appreciate EZAZABC doing a little bit of research and pointing me in the right direction. But because we moved these suits back, we had to get rid of the steam turbine. You may remember that there was a bunch of metal tiles holding in a steam room that another steam turbine was using, just to make sure this area stays nice and chill. Well, remember when I told you last episode that I had a neat idea for these steam turbines here? Well, here it is. We've replaced the 2 insulated tiles here with metal tiles. So now, these metal tiles here are basically a heat spike. So the thermal aqua tuners and the industrial brick all share the same thermal environment in which these 3 steam turbines can easily take care of. We also added a little bit of water down here just for the benefit of having a better thermal conductor than the carbon dioxide sitting above it. Now it's time to get working on this. Step 1 is going to be moving these batteries. Unfortunately, this battery here controls the petroleum generators. No big deal, we're just going to reroute it to one of these batteries here. We started adding in a few more batteries just to help the power grid stabilize a little bit, because the more batteries you have, the more capacity you can hold. So when those big chungus petroleum generators start to run, they can dump all that power into more batteries. It doesn't do a whole lot, but I have found the more batteries you add to your grid, the more stable it can become. While the dupes are working on that, I wanted to show you how well these liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen tanks are working. There's not a single bit of hydrogen in this room. And it's because, as I told you last time, you want to maintain a certain level of hydrogen and make sure there's a bunch of nice temperature shift plates in here. And for that reason, as soon as the hydrogen enters the room, it instantly flashes into liquid. Absolutely perfect. Well, I would have preferred to have a liquid reservoir in here. But we didn't have the space for that, and I also would have liked to have the extra space to put in a return loop so we can drop off all the extra fuel that we're not going to be using. But either way, this works great. And I just realized that automation wire was going right through the power control station again, which basically turns off the power control station every time the petroleum generators turn off, which means our electrical engineer wasn't able to apply NG's tune-up, so these big chungus boys weren't producing their 3,000 watts as they should be. I wonder how much power and petroleum that mistake has cost us in the past, I don't know, 30 or 40 cycles? Oh yeah, that's the good stuff. Considering they're now producing 1,000 watts more, which is 50% more, this probably results pretty closely to a 50% savings in petroleum usage. Now, as awkward as this is going to be, we're going to throw in another viscogel lock. So we're going to end up putting a bottle emptier here, making the visco gel lock here, and then the duplicants will be able to walk through here and get into what's going to be a mess of crude oil and natural gas. Well, apparently this method's not going to work, because when I try to drop the visco gel here, it actually just pushes it. Because this tile is in the way of the little nozzle, it lands right here. There we go, much better. Now we can seal this up. I can vacuum all the carbon dioxide out of here. At 90 kilos per tile, it's going to take a minute. Using a little bit of forethought, we're going to start working on our natural gas solution. If you remember, your oil well is going to start producing a bunch of natural gas, and you eventually have to get rid of it. The problem is we have about 1 million gas pipes going from here all the way over to here. It would also take breaking into this area if we wanted to try to use the one natural gas generator for both systems. So I figured we could add a little bit more power to this grid, and even better, throw the natural gas generator inside of our power plant. Now it did require moving our hydrogen generator, although it doesn't get much use now because all of the hydrogen is prioritized to go towards liquid hydrogen. But if that ever gets backed up, this hydrogen generator will then burn it off. But now we're able to get a natural gas generator in here. We had to extend our sort of petroleum water landing site, and we're also going to need to take care of all the carbon dioxide this thing produces. But we can send it off to the vacuum of space. Well, that wasn't too shabby. We now have a vacuum, which means we can get rid of this lock that I was really hoping to keep in case we ever had to get back in here, but oh well. By the way, I was cleaning up some visco gel and I learned something new. I didn't know visco gel could go 3 tiles high. Now I kind of want to do an experiment to see how tall it can go. There we go. That looks pretty nice. We just changed where the gas pipe was heading. Now it's going to feed this beautiful natural gas generator. Now we're going to add a smart battery, except we're not going to make it out of copper. That would be silliness. Steel is a much better idea. And this battery here is going to control this natural gas generator. And we're also going to have it set on 9070, just like this one here, because we need to be using that natural gas generator. Otherwise, we'll get too backed up with natural gas, and again, bad things will happen. Speaking of automation, in our normal design, we always have this hydro sensor connected to the pump. And we do that because we want to maintain a certain level of oil because it's usually acting as a liquid lock. It's not in this case. In fact, we want to make sure that the oil does not go above this tile here because then it would interact with our visco gel liquid lock, possibly breaking it and then ruining the whole setup. So for that reason, we're actually going to connect it to the oil well itself. And as long as the oil level is below X, the oil well can keep producing oil, which we'll keep it as the default with 500 kilos. That seems to be fine. Now, I don't think we're actually going to get up to 500 kilos on that second tile of height because the liquid pump's going to be able to pump all the oil it can. Now, the painful part of it is getting all the oil from here and bringing it over to here. I don't necessarily want to do that, but there's nowhere else where I can put another oil refinery in this colony. Certainly not in this setup here. Additionally, we also have to get a water line down. The water line's a little easier. We actually have a full line of water right here. I suppose we're just going to have to go with the very, very long way around. All right, here we go. The oil is going to start here, go all the way through our industrial brick, go to the top of the brick where it finally makes its way out, staying, of course, in insulated tiles from now on. It then heads all the way over into our rocket silo, up and over, and joins the rest of our oil. With all the piping in, I think we're about ready to double our petroleum. In goes the oil well. As a reminder, the oil well doesn't have an overheat temperature. Don't know why, especially considering something as simple as the critter drop-off has an overheat temperature. And it's just a sign on a pole. Oh, there it is. You know, since we started playing Spaced Out, I really do miss the oil wells. It's just on most of your Spaced Out style asteroids, there's not enough water to be running any sort of significant oil well production, at least on some of the recent seeds that I've been pulling. Now with this very long oil run, I'd love to put in a buffer tank somewhere, but there's a couple problems with that. One, the oil's very hot, so putting the buffer tank in our main part of our base is probably ill-advised. And I don't have much room over here, which this brings up the new mini base mod. They were nice enough to include an option that you'll be able to break through here in order to gain access to this area. As the usual with the internet, some of the folks then complained that it kind of ruins the spirit of what the mini base does, forcing you to build inside here. Well, I agree with that to a certain extent, except for a couple of points. One, The new mod made it optional, so if it's not the playstyle that you want to play with, just don't include it. But second, if you do get to a point where you're like, man, I really like this colony, and I'd like to do some stuff out here, well, now you'll have the option. Not to mention the fact that you can make mini base smaller than this, or larger than this. So the whole point of the mod is actually to give you the opportunity to play how you want to play. So in the end, I think this is a perfect example of don't go out of your way just to yuck somebody's yum. Speaking of yum, look at all this beautiful petroleum production. The oil refinery pretty much stays processing. In fact, in the past 2 cycles, we're up around 80% compared to the previous 5 of 30%. Man, you know it'd be nice? Making a little petroleum boiler. That's another way to quickly double your petroleum production. Because remember, your oil refinery only gives you 5 kilos for every 10 kilos of crude oil. Look at all the beautiful petroleum flowing into our fuel tanks. That's right. We're all the way backed up. Our first buffer tank is absolutely chock full. In fact, why don't we go ahead and load up 1,200 kilos worth of oxalite and head off to this planetoid. I'm looking forward to getting some free steel and finding out what these 2 mystery components are. Now this voyage takes 9 cycles, as opposed to the 3 for the first ring and the 6 for the second ring. So we'll find out how Ed does in our next episode. I know this one was a little bit shorter, but I'm getting ready for the big PC build, which is going to be a massive upgrade for this channel. I've also been going through some minor audio changes, so let me know if you can hear a difference, and whether or not that difference is good or bad. So until next time, happy gaming, and I'll talk to you soon.